Did you know the most painful moment for a narcissist isn't actually the moment they get abandoned? It's the moment they're forced to face a much harder truth, that they themselves destroyed the one real, genuine love they ever had access to in their entire life. There's a concept in psychology worth sitting with here. The idea that the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at directly don't just disappear, they end up quietly running the show from somewhere underneath our awareness. For a narcissist, what's sitting underneath is emptiness, a constant fear of being exposed, and a fundamental inability to love anyone with real sincerity. In this video, we're breaking down the exact moment a narcissist hits their breaking point, the moment the mask finally slips, the moment their usual playbook of control stops working, and the moment they realize what they lost wasn't just a convenient source of attention, it was genuine love, something that doesn't come back around twice. We'll look at why narcissists aren't just victims of their own self-deception. They're also the architects of their own downfall, the ones who destroy their own shot at ever becoming genuinely authentic. So what happens inside them when that truth lands? How does your silence, your simple act of letting go, have the power to collapse their entire constructed world? Stick around because you'll walk away understanding exactly how a narcissist destroys love from the inside out, and also how you, as the empathetic one in the dynamic, can turn your pain into real strength and finally step out of their shadow to reclaim your own life. Let's start with the illusion of control. Inside the internal world of a narcissist, there's a kind of quiet tragedy playing out. They genuinely believe they're controlling everyone around them, when in reality they're trapped inside their own snare. Whatever a person refuses to consciously acknowledge about themselves tends to come back around and shape their life anyway. The control a narcissist thinks they hold isn't real power. It's a reflection of unconscious fear, fear of abandonment, fear of being forgotten, fear of ever having to look directly at what they're hiding from themselves. On the surface, they come across as charming, sharp at reading emotions, skilled at using a polished finesse to convince everyone they're basically perfect. But none of that is love or empathy. It's strategy, a calculated psychological game where the narcissist believes that if they manipulate skillfully enough, they'll secure the upper hand. What they're actually running is an illusion built out of ego, a fragile structure designed to hide the cracks underneath. They lean on a familiar toolkit, calculated compliments, selective attention, sudden emotional withdrawal, all engineered to throw the other person off balance and make them question their own feelings. The more confused the other person becomes, the more dependent they grow, and the narcissist mistakes that dependency for a win. In reality, it's just the expression of a soul that never feels like it has enough. The part of themselves a narcissist refuses to look at is emptiness and deep insecurity, and they build an entire mask of control just to avoid staring into that void. But here's the paradox. The harder they work to control others, the more clearly they reveal how little control they actually have over themselves. And when real love shows up, it functions like a beam of light cutting straight into that darkness, exposing that the narcissist doesn't know how to connect sincerely, only how to replay the same tired power games. This is where the whole breaking point begins, because no illusion holds up forever once real truth starts shining a light on it. Now let's look at what happens when real love actually touches that hidden part of them. From the start, narcissists tend to walk into relationships with an almost irresistible pull. They know how to watch closely, how to mirror your desires, fears, and longings until you genuinely feel like you found the person who understands you completely. They can say the exact words you once whispered only to yourself, perform the gestures you'd secretly wished for, even share dreams that convince you your soul just found its missing half. But what gets projected outward like that is almost always something that hasn't been faced within. The narcissist doesn't actually see you as a full person. They're using you as a mirror to reinforce their own self-image. What looks like empathy on the surface is, underneath, really just strategy, a hunger for control disguised as connection. When a narcissist convinces you they understand your every heartbeat, that's their way of infiltrating the exact core of your emotions, the place where you're at your most vulnerable, and that's precisely where their power over you begins to take root. This is the stage most people recognize as love bombing. The overwhelming flood of affection, endless compliments, intense attention, grand promises about a beautiful future together. It makes you feel elevated like the most special person in the world. But any experience that feels this intense, this idealized right out of the gate, almost always carries the fingerprint of something being hidden. Real love doesn't need extravagance to hide behind. It's steady and doesn't need to constantly prove itself. Underneath all that dazzling light, calculation is already quietly at work, laying the foundation for a deeply unbalanced relationship, one where the narcissist occupies the position of giver While you get placed in the role of dependent receiver, they plant the belief in you that your happiness is tied directly to their presence, and once you've grown accustomed to that steady downpour of affection, their sudden silence becomes a weapon they can wield at will. This isn't love anymore at that point, it's conditioning. What you believe you're seeing is a kindred spirit, but really you're only seeing your own longing reflected back through their mask, a mask that inevitably cracks as time reveals what's really underneath. The painful reality is this: genuine love, the very thing that could have nourished both people, gets twisted into a strategy of control. And yet buried inside that deception, a seed of awakening gets planted anyway, because sooner or later, the light of real love will land directly on the part of themselves they've worked so hard to hide. And in that moment, it won't be you trembling, it'll be them. After that dazzling beginning, once the other person has started to genuinely trust them, the narcissist subtly starts changing the rules of the game. The constant attention stops flowing quite so freely. Instead, they begin planting tiny cracks in the other person's sense of self. What gets denied doesn't vanish. It seeps into places you least expect it to show up. And for a narcissist, that hidden material shows up most clearly in the way they manipulate emotions just to maintain their position. The endless sweetness starts shifting into backhanded compliments. You did well, but it's still not quite perfect, or sudden emotional withdrawals that leave the other person stunned, unsure what they did wrong. None of this is random. It's strategy, designed to plant self-doubt in the other person, forcing them to keep chasing the narcissist's approval. This is sometimes called ego erosion, where a person's sense of self stops standing firm on its own, and they become vulnerable to being turned into someone else's puppet. The exact moment someone starts quietly asking themselves, "Am I not good enough? Did I do something wrong?" That's the moment they've unconsciously handed control right over to the narcissist. Gaslighting, one of their most dangerous tools, isn't just about denying reality outright. It's the restructuring of memory itself, making the other person doubt their own feelings, even their own eyes. Once you no longer trust yourself, you're forced to rely on external anchors instead, and the narcissist is always right there ready to hand you the answers as long as it keeps them at the center of everything. But the illusion is more fragile than they think. Emotional control was never true connection. It can silence someone, force compliance, but it can never actually nurture love. Real transformation only ever comes after some kind of internal crisis, and it's in that exact crisis that the manipulated person slowly starts to realize love cannot survive in a climate of constant doubt. What the narcissist fails to understand is this: every time they wound the other person, they don't just erode trust, they unknowingly plant a seed of awakening at the same time. Sooner or later, the person being controlled comes to understand that their worth was never something someone else's validation could give or take away. And once that realization lands fully, the narcissist's whole power over them collapses quietly without a fight. Let's talk about the difference between love and possession. In a healthy relationship, love gets built on mutual respect, where two people stay whole individually and grow alongside each other. But in a narcissist's world, love gets twisted into ownership instead. They don't see their partner as a complete human being in their own right. They see them as an extension of the ego they're desperately trying to protect. Wherever love genuinely rules, there's no real appetite for power. And wherever power dominates, love is almost always missing. It's exactly this confusion that turns love into a tool of control for a narcissist. Attachment to them isn't companionship, it's proof of dominance. They believe that if someone truly loves them, that person has to put them first at all times, has to accept ongoing self-sacrifice, has to tolerate sudden withdrawals of affection without ever questioning it. In this twisted internal logic, love becomes a loyalty test, and possession gets mislabeled as intimacy. The narcissist grows jealous of anything that brings you joy outside of them, a friend, a hobby, even a quiet moment of solitude, because every drop of your emotional energy is supposed to circle back and fuel the little universe they built around their own ego. Real love, the kind that's patient and doesn't try to possess anyone, becomes a threat to them because it demands sincerity and a willingness to let go of power entirely. And that's exactly what a narcissist cannot do. To love truly, they'd have to take off the mask and accept that they too are flawed. So instead, they sabotage. They devalue love into a transaction, wanting to be loved through submission rather than freedom. Yet the paradox holds: the tighter they grip, the faster love slips through their fingers, because love only survives where there's equality and genuine freedom for both people. They believe ownership equals connection, but possession is actually love's biggest enemy. And once the other person realizes that, they stop wanting to be property and choose freedom instead. When they walk away, the narcissist loses the one thing power could never buy back for them: real love. Silence becomes a weapon in a narcissist's hands too. In genuine love, silence is just a pause, a moment to reconnect. In a narcissist's hands, it becomes an obsessive tool for control. Warm one day, cold the next. That inconsistency creates confusion, and inside that confusion, they plant anxiety. When you can't understand why the affection changed, you start searching for the cause inside yourself, unknowingly handing them the pen to rewrite your own script. This silence is calculated. A compliment lifts you sky high. An abrupt withdrawal sends you crashing. And that push-pull binds you tightly to their approval. Every unexpected return of affection starts to feel like a reward, when really it's just scraps rationed out to preserve their control. A narcissist doesn't know how to sustain real intimacy because that requires consistency and presence, things they simply can't offer. Instead, they orchestrate a rhythm of love and rejection, keeping you perpetually off balance. And the more unsteady you become, the more energy you pour into reading their moods instead of seeing the situation clearly. Silence often gets misread as mystery, even as a sign of love. You keep asking, "What did I do wrong?" And in trying to fix something unfixable, you sink deeper into the trap. But the moment you recognize the silence isn't love, it's manipulation, real awakening begins. Once you stop reacting, stop guessing, stop letting silence define your worth, their entire system of control starts to crack. The narcissist's actual breaking point doesn't arrive through fiery arguments or dramatic breakups. It arrives in silence, when the person they once manipulated suddenly stops reacting altogether. Real growth comes from making the hidden, uncomfortable parts of yourself conscious. And here, that light of truth shines directly into the narcissist's own hidden depths. Throughout the relationship, they believed the power sat firmly in their hands, that as long as the other person cried, raged, or pleaded, they remained the center of the universe. But when the survivor begins their healing journey, when silence quietly replaces every usual reaction, the whole script collapses. What actually terrifies a narcissist isn't anger, it's indifference. Anger is still a form of connection. Indifference is total withdrawal of energy, the moment the other person stops seeing them as a source of power and starts seeing them exactly as they are, a wounded, empty person incapable of real love. In this moment, narcissists often lash out, intensifying old tactics, blaming, bargaining, reviving abandoned promises, but the harder they try, the more they fail, because the old channels of connection no longer function. This is the real psychological collapse. The moment they realize control was never connection, and that power built on someone else's dependency only lasts until that person finds themselves again. Ironically, they believe themselves invincible the entire time, but in the end, they get undone by simple indifference. Silence isn't surrender, it's the final declaration. You no longer have power in my life. That's the one outcome a narcissist never sees coming. If there's one obsession every narcissist shares, it's the fear of being forgotten. They can withstand hatred, criticism, even open contempt, but indifference is their genuine worst nightmare. Because in their world, existence is measured by whether they can provoke a reaction out of someone. Nothing terrifies them more than facing themselves honestly, and indifference forces exactly that. Even anger or tears become fuel that confirms their importance. But when the person they once manipulated stops reacting altogether, no jealousy, no pain, no tears, just quiet silence and walking away, the whole illusion crumbles. Being forgotten works like an invisible mirror, reflecting back the truth that the narcissist was never quite as grand as they imagined themselves to be. In the eyes of others, they become nothing more than a faint memory, a closed chapter in someone else's story. This is what happens when the social mask a person wears shatters and whatever's underneath it surfaces, dragging genuine panic along with it. Here's the paradox. Narcissists would honestly rather be hated than forgotten. Hatred is still a form of connection, proof that they still hold some kind of influence over someone. But indifference is the end of the road entirely. It leaves no room for negotiation, no room for power, no hope of ever coming back around. It says clearly, you no longer belong anywhere in my world. And that's the one thing they're never actually prepared to face. Being forgotten is, in a sense, a call to finally face yourself honestly. But instead of receiving it as a genuine chance to grow, narcissists panic. They scramble for a new source of supply. They chase attention at any cost available to them, sometimes through smear campaigns, sometimes through recycled promises dusted off and reused. Yet the harder they try to prove they can't possibly be forgotten, the more they expose the plain truth. Their sense of value only exists for as long as someone else is still paying attention to them. This is the harshest sentence a narcissist can face. Not revenge, not humiliation, simple erasure from memory. When you walk away in peace, when your silence becomes your final and most complete statement, the narcissist is forced to confront their deepest fear directly. They have no more power, no more centrality, no place left anywhere in your story. In healthy relationships, love is fertile ground for real healing, a space where two people reflect each other and grow together. But for the narcissist, true love becomes a mirror that exposes exactly what's false inside them. A person becomes whole by confronting what they don't want to face, not by avoiding it. And love, by its patient, honest nature, is exactly that kind of unyielding mirror. It unmasks deceit, inconsistency, and the hollow space at the center of the narcissist's inner life. For them, to love is to possess. Real love requires full presence, vulnerability, and taking responsibility when you get things wrong, and that terrifies a narcissist to their core because they cannot bear removing the mask built specifically to hide fragility and imperfection. So instead, they turn love into a battlefield. "Where do you love me quietly?" gets replaced with "Will you obey me?" When their partner offers true love, the kind that endures through hurt and patiently waits for change, the narcissist doesn't feel grateful. They feel genuinely threatened because that love demands truth and real presence, not performance. To the narcissist, that sounds less like love and more like an indictment, proof they don't know how to love or take accountability. When someone loves sincerely, they unintentionally shine light onto the exact darkness the narcissist has always kept covered, and instead of growing from it, the narcissist attacks, withdraws, or destroys the relationship because letting real love touch them would mean facing the truth that the ego they've defended their whole life is an empty illusion. This is the greatest tragedy in the whole story. Love, the one force that could have genuinely redeemed and transformed them, is the exact thing they fear and sabotage instead. Rather than letting love change them, they turn it into just another tool to prove their own power. But love will never submit to domination. It only exists where there's equality, presence, and sincerity. And once they destroy that, they lose more than just a person. They lose the only real shot at redemption they secretly longed for, but never once dared to actually accept. When they first appear in your life, a narcissist often shows up like a fresh breeze, magnetic, witty, refined, seeming to grasp your most hidden desires almost instantly. That charm convinces a lot of people they've found a kindred spirit, but that persona isn't the real person underneath. It's a mask doing far more heavy lifting than an ordinary one. That initial allure is a carefully crafted persona built specifically to impress. In the beginning, it works flawlessly, attentive, a great listener, eager to shower you with warmth. You feel genuinely seen. But underneath, it's all strategy, learning to mirror your emotions and words so effectively that you feel completely special, playing the part just well enough to make your own hopes and expectations feel like they've been met. But no mask lasts forever. When small conflicts come up, when life demands real presence and consistency, the mask starts slipping. The sweet words lose their soul. Gestures that once thrilled you start repeating like a stale script, and you begin sensing something isn't real. The most painful part isn't the mask falling, it's realizing you were in love with an illusion. You loved the image they performed, not them. That loss feels bigger than an ordinary breakup because it forces you to sit with the fact that your love was exploited. Beneath that polished mask, there was never a whole person, just insecurity and fear of exposure. A narcissist can't maintain charm indefinitely because it never came from their true self. It was only ever a disguise to keep you hooked longer. When the mask finally falls, one truth becomes undeniable. That initial charm was never love, it was a tool to bind you. Yet in that exact moment, you also receive a genuine gift. Clarity, because once you've seen behind the mask, you can never fully believe the illusion again, and that's exactly when their power over you starts dissolving while you start reclaiming yourself. Nothing wounds a narcissist quite like watching you become genuinely happy without them. In their world, power only exists for as long as you remain dependent, still seeking them for validation. But when you build a genuinely fulfilling life that needs nothing from them, it's not just your liberation, it's a mirror reflecting their deepest failure back at them. A quiet sentence forcing them to face that they were never the center of the universe. They're replaceable. Their power was an illusion the entire time. What makes this awakening so excruciating for them is that it pierces the exact ego wound they've spent their life hiding from. They believed you'd crumble without them, but the truth is the opposite. The farther you go, the brighter you shine. And it's that light of peace and genuine self-love that smashes through their false defenses. Whatever a person refuses to face stays with them until it's brought into the light, and for the narcissist, that unfaced part is the fear of being forgotten, abandoned, and proven ordinary after all. You don't need revenge, and you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your joyful, whole existence is the most powerful response available to you, confirming that real love never requires control, and that your worth was never defined by someone else's gaze, only by your own heart. Every time you live fully without them in the picture, you're rewriting your own story, and in that story, you're no longer the victim, you're the author. There's a truth few people dare to face directly. A narcissist doesn't actually fear rejection itself, they fear the meaninglessness rejection exposes underneath it. When you stop reacting, when you stop falling into the emotional spirals they used to create so easily, you cut the one thread that convinced them they still mattered in your life. For a narcissist, the ego isn't sustained by real love, it's sustained by attention and reaction, even by the pain they inflict on others. When all that disappears, what's left is a deep void, a place where they're finally forced to face themselves, the one thing they never actually want to do. The parts of ourselves we consistently avoid don't fade away. They end up quietly controlling us until we face and integrate them. A narcissist lives almost entirely inside that avoided space, disguising it behind a glamorous mask. The moment you withdraw, that mask falls away. What pains them most isn't simply losing you, it's losing the mirror that reflected back the inflated version of themselves they worked so hard to construct. The moment you choose silence and your own peace, they lose the audience that kept the illusion alive and the truth gets laid bare. It was fiction the whole time. They might chase new people, new sources of attention, but somewhere underneath, they know, once they've truly been seen through, there's no place left to hide. From your side of things, as the one who survived it, this moment carries a genuinely liberating meaning because silence and withdrawal were never failures on your part. They were quiet victories all along, declaring that you're no longer anyone's puppet. This lesson extends well beyond just this one relationship, too. Once you learn to stand firm against manipulation, you learn to live more honestly with yourself in general, set healthy boundaries everywhere, and recognize your own worth without needing anyone's approval to confirm it. So don't be afraid when a narcissist tries to erase you from the story they built around themselves. The truth is, you're the one who erased them from the story of your own life. From that moment forward, you don't just walk away, you rise into a stronger, freer, more grounded version of yourself. You don't need to prove anything to a narcissist, and you don't need a belated apology from someone who never actually saw your worth. The simple fact that you're still here, still living, still smiling, is the most powerful testimony to your own strength that exists. The narcissist may twist the story, may put on 100 masks to escape reality, but none of that changes the fact that you've outgrown them, not just by breaking free, but by becoming more mature, more clear-eyed, and more genuinely powerful than before. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become next. You're not defined by the wounds a narcissist left behind. You're defined by how you rise, how you learn, how you transform pain into real strength and rewrite your own story. That's the true victory, quiet, never boastful, but resonant all the way down. There will come a day when you realize your silence was the loudest thunder you ever produced, choosing peace over chaos, boundaries over abuse, light over darkness. These are the sharpest answers you could ever hand back to them. A narcissist may never admit it, but somewhere underneath, they know you no longer belong to their spiral, and that's the one thing they can never truly sit with. So if you're still doubting your own worth today, let this be your reminder. You deserve genuine love. You deserve real peace. You deserve a life where your heart is no longer weighed against the scales of someone else's manipulation. Don't just survive it. Live fully, live fiercely, be living proof that darkness can never fully overshadow the light.